Hello everybody, my name is Mario5514 and welcome back to another Splatoon Talk video. In today's video, we're going to be looking back at some of our previous updates from Splatoon 3. In the last video, we went over patch 1.2, now we're jumping into patch 2.0, another major update that was released for Chill Season 2022, which included several new weapons and some other new changes that a lot of people were expecting from the previous update. And if you end up liking the video, consider subscribing, and let's get started. So, here's the notes that they left for us. This update focuses on adding data and new features relating to Chill Season 2022, adjustments to battles and Salmon Run, and changes to Tricolor battles. For battles, besides an adjustment to reducing attack frequency for the battle style of repeatedly firing tent missiles from afar, we also focused on updates to increase some weapons' ease of use. For Salmon Run, in addition to lowering the big shot's attack frequency and giving players more chance to damage it by lowering its movement speed, we implemented changes to improve factors that made some special weapons difficult to use. For Splatfest, as announced in the previous update, we made significant changes to the Tricolor battle mode. In addition to this are various added features and improvements, large and small, and bug fixes. So yeah, basically, you remember all the bug fixes you saw in 1.2? Yeah, they decided to do a bit more in 2.0. There's more where that came from. Our next update is planned for the middle of Chill Season 2022 and should focus on balance adjustments upon analysis of data from the newly added weapons. So yeah, basically all the weapons that we've gotten from Splatoon 1 and 2 are making their reappearance once again. So we have all these weapons here. So we have some added features, feature improvements and adjustments, some season and catalog changes. So yeah. Which will also, in one of ProChar's videos, which I may do in the future, I will talk about what kind of weapons were introduced at the time for all these updates, starting in 2.0. So yeah, you guys will get to see what we were talking about, or what was shown prior to their changes later on in the game's life. And now we have our patch notes. So first up is Tri-Stringer, where the size of terrain area inked by falling spray has been increased, and the number of spray droplets generated when firing a distantly aimed shot has been increased. So basically it can paint more from a distance, and it can paint where it lands, or when they fall. And for Splatoon Wiper, the width of the ink launched by horizontal slashes has been increased by about 27%. The size of terrain area inked by falling spray has been increased, and it is easier to connect ink in an uninterrupted line. So before this, Splatoon Wiper would just paint basically, it would paint like these 2 or 3 spots where you're slashing the weapon, just like normal horizontal slashes. This change made it to where it would now paint a straight line in front of it. So yeah, in the past, people had to rely on the charge slash. Now they could just use the horizontal slash without any issues here, which was a huge change to boost Splatoon Wiper substantially. For our sub-weapons, Angle Shooter was the only thing that got a change. Initial velocity is about 20% faster, and flight range has been extended. Yeah, this was like the first attempt that Nintendo made to try to make Angle Shooter good, even though this was basically like a crossbreed of Burst Bomb and Point Sensor. So that's what Angle Shooter was. It functioned like Burst Bomb, where it dealt damage, but it also located people like Point Sensor for a brief period of time. And for our specials, we have Zipcaster, where its ink consumption when using a main weapon while the Zipcaster is active has been decreased to about 67% of previously. For Inkvac, damage of the return shot has been increased from 120 to 220. This change is intended to increase the damage done to Big Bubbler and Rainmaker shields, and to allow players to defeat opponents armored due to Squid Roll or Squid Surge. So yeah, that was like kind of like a counterable people could use to counter against Inkvac. This made it to where you no longer could. Meaning that if it touched you when you performed a Squid Surge, you were dead, or a Squid Roll. If you Squid Rolled and you try to counter it, you died. For Reef Slider, damage from rush attack and from being caught up in the explosion at short range has been increased from 180 to 220. This was basically like their first attempt to make Reef Slider good, even though it was like terrible at this time. And this would not be the last. There would be multiple updates where they try to fix it. This change is intended to increase the damage done to Big Bubble and Rainmaker shields and to players to defeat. Alright, same thing that we did for Inkvac, so this is basically the same thing. Tent missiles. After launch is confirmed, the special gauge will now slowly decrease, and the special gauge will not be able to begin charging again until the gauge has been completely drained from the previous use. So 2.0 was the update that Tense missiles got their 10-second cooldown. So the missile spam ability that we saw in Splatoon 2 was gone. This finally put Tense missiles in a position where they could no longer be spammed, though at the same time you had to use them strategically in this case. So yeah, a lot of people who saw this change were instantly, they gave a sigh of relief knowing that missile spam was not going to be a thing like it was in Splatoon 2. So this made it to where missile spam was gone. And points for special is kind of decently long. Aerospray MG gets Reef Slider at 190. I mean, they're trying to make other Reef Slider weapons good. NZAP 85 gets Tacticooler at 190. Splattershot Pro gets Crab Tank at 190. I mean, Splashmatic is still considered meta. They try to make Pro a bit more usable, especially that it was still terrible at this time. Jet Squelcher will get Ink Vac at 190. H3 will get Tacticooler at 190. And both E-Leaders, both the regular and E-Leader scope, will get Wavebreaker at 210. So yeah, that's all we got for this update. And we also have some changes here. Stage changes only to Undertow Spillway for Turf War. And we also have some other changes which eventually would be, some of them would be buffs, others would be nerfs. I think this one was like this one I have highlighted here. This is basically talking about Trizooka. The sound effect when wielding the Trizooka is now harder for allies to hear and easier for opponents to hear. And remember, at this time, Trizooka was remember, back then, Trizooka back then was completely trash. I mean, originally its startup was 15 frames, and it had its old blast radius prior to 9.3, which we'll talk about later. However, because its direct still dealt 220, though its blast damage, which was at 4 units at the time, only dealt 40 damage. So Trizooka was still an inconsistent special. But it wouldn't be until later that the devs would try to fix this special, and eventually it would become a special that would become a major threat in the future. But at this time, they're still trying to make other fixes to make them a bit more usable, and at the same time make them to where they have to do stuff or they have to be careful in that instance. We also have our first changes to X battles. X battles and new battle mode has been added. So remember in Splatoon 2 when X rank was basically its own thing? Yeah, they now changed it for Splatoon 3. Originally, in this game, if you reached S+, you gained access to X battles. Originally in Splatoon 2, if you reached S plus 10, you would gain access to X rank. And wins and losses would determine your X power. And if you dropped below a certain amount in X battles in X rank in Splatoon 2, you would drop down to S plus 9, I think. So yeah. X Battle is a battle mode where players of ranks S plus 10 and up can compete in battles for X power. So yeah, they also began like the ranks division. They also had their own divisions. People in like North America or in Europe would be in the Tenatech division, and countries like in Japan or Australia, like anywhere in Oceania, would be in the Takaroka division. So this was basically like the new thing here. And it wouldn't be until later that that Nintendo would start making changes towards X battles. Changes to ranked battles. Added a feature allowing players to purposely reset their rank. This feature can only be used once per season by players of rank B or higher. What rank a player is reset to is determined automatically by their estimated ability based on their battles up to that point. Players can use this feature by opening up the lobby menu, moving their cursors to Anarchy Battle and pressing ZL. Some values of the initial cost and rank points spent to enter an Anarchy Battle series have been increased. So yeah, if you're in like A-, you have to... So yeah, basically it was increased by 10 points for all of it. So for A-, you had to spend 110 points. For A rank, you had to spend 120. A+ was 130. S was 170, and then S plus 0 and higher was 180. Also, there are a lot of other changes to Salmon Run. They also have added Big Run. Big Run is a phenomenon where mass numbers of salmonids swim upstream once every few months. So this was basically like when you saw the big run in like Undertow Spillway or Barnacle and Dime, which was the most recent one. That's basically what Big Run is talking about. They basically swim upstream or they go off course into on our turf, so we have to push them off of our turf here. Also, we also have some changes to our big shot, our boss salmonid. Movement speed is now about 30% slower than before. In addition to lowering the big shot's attack frequency, this also lengthens the amount of time it spends walking on land, increasing the player's window of opportunity to attack. The animation played as the big shot's shot comes flying in will be shown for longer than before, making it easier to determine where the shot was fired from. So that was like a quality of life change. Originally, when the big shot fired its shot in the air from a cannon, it basically was like unknown where it was coming from. This changed it to where it would make it easier for you to see it, which was a nice change for it. And then we have our changes to our specials, which were all for Salmon Run. For Killer Whale 5.1, Triple Ink Strike, Inkjet, and Booyah Bomb. For Killer Whale, increase the precision with which it tracks a boss salmonids, and damage dealt has been increased by up to 25%. Triple Ink Strike, the guide devices will now trigger when touched by a salmonid. Damage dealt will be increased by up to 25%. Same thing with Killer Whale. However, the damage values between Tri-Strike and Whale were completely different. Inkjet. The player will no longer be a target for most salmonid attacks when returning to their position after the use period has ended. Booyah Bomb. Player will no longer be a target for most salmonid attacks while charging up the Booyah Bomb. So yeah, those are some quality of life changes there. And then of course we also have some changes to Splatfest for the tricolor, as well as for the cloud. All the other changes that are here. Link is in the description below for this update, which you can check out on Inkopedia. And we also have some bug fixes. Fix an issue where standing on the edge of a sponge of the opponent's color and jumping would let players do a jump at the same height as the regular ground. Yeah, if you're in enemy ink or if you're on the enemy sponge, your jump height was reduced because you're basically an enemy ink there. So they fixed that, and there's a whole lot of other changes where that came from, as well as other changes here for multiplayer. So yeah, 1.2 is basically all of the other changes, but now 2.0 is basically finishing off or continuing what 1.2 might have missed. So yeah, there's a lot of other changes here. And that's it. That is 2.0. Stick around for the next update as we're basically moving forward as we're going to be seeing what kind of changes are going to be shown for the meta. And keep in mind, our top tiers at this time are Splashmatic, Sloshing Machine, Dark Tetradoolies, and the Splatana Stamper. So yeah, that list is bound to change as time goes by. Keep that in mind. However, will those changes come? We don't know yet. Which we'll find out in our next video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you then. See you next time.